Today I'm looking at how to correctly use spray cans to paint your guitars. And I'm using these nitrocellulose lacquers supplied by NitorLACK. Now you need to make sure you shake your cans beforehand. I go for 2 whole minutes. One reason cans like this are called rattle cans is you can hear the ball bearing inside that's shaking around to loosen up all the lacquer that may have settled, mixing up all the pigment. And before we start, I just want to show you one thing I love about these cans, which is the caps. So the caps have got a fan nozzle on them. And what you can see here is that yellow fan nozzle can be rotated round. Now it's really key when you're using your spray cans that you know the spray pattern that comes out of the can. So with the nozzle in one position, you get a vertical spray like this. And in the other position, you get horizontal spray. It comes set with the vertical spray, which is how I normally use it. And what's great about a fan spray is you get a nice, wide, consistent spray. With some other cheaper nozzles, it kind of splatters all over the place. Another key thing to remember whilst you're shaking your can is it should really be at room temperature. And the objects you're spraying should be at room temperature. So if you're spraying somewhere cold, it's not ideal. I have a spray booth that I normally heat during the winter. I turn my rads off in there though when I'm spraying. And some people like to keep their cans warm by putting them in warm water first, like a bucket of warm water. Make sure it's not boiling. That helps raise the temperature up. But I like to keep my cans in a heated room for the hour leading up to when I use them and then give them this good shake. Now, when I was taught to use spray cans and air guns, there are a couple of key things that I was taught that have stuck with me that I want to make sure you're aware of. The first one is, if you spray your spray onto the guitar surface and then move the spray can, what you'll see is you get a pool of the lacquer building up and dripping down. If you spray across your surface and then stop your spray while you're pointing at the surface, you'll get a pool that builds up and drips down. I prefer playing in the vertical position like this with the guitar upright. Now, if you're not able to do that for some reason, I would recommend when you're spraying with it lying flat that you actually don't put your can directly above the guitar body like this, but hold it at a bit of an angle. That helps a bit to reduce any potential dripping, although I've not really had dripping with these cans before. You also want to make sure, if possible, that the guitar body is lifted quite high off of the surface below so you don't get any spray back from the overspray of the paint bouncing off the table or whatever you're on and back up onto the underside of the guitar. And when you're spraying vertically, you want to keep your can parallel to the guitar body. Try not to have any angle at all. That helps with the consistent, even spraying. On the cans, it will often say how far away you should be from the surface, but the trick I was taught was do a handspan away, and that's normally perfect. So what you want to do is start with your spray pointing off of your guitar surface and then move across the surface while you're spraying, just like this. Key thing you're going to do when you're spraying your guitar body is make sure that each pass of the spray overlaps with the last pass slightly. That helps you give a consistent coverage as you're going down. Now I'm going to talk about coats of paint. And when I talk about coat of paint, I mean using your can in one whole horizontal and then one whole vertical direction. So the vertical is going to completely overlap the horizontal that went before. That's what I call one coat, not 2 coats, one coat. Now you'll get used to how fast you move your can backwards and forwards, but I find this rate that I'm going at is absolutely perfect. Now on cans, it will often recommend how long to leave between each coat. For these, I leave 15 minutes between each coat. And I then do 3 coats in one session and no more. The reason is to make sure I'm not applying it too thick. Of course, with any new paint or lacquer you're using, I always recommend a test. So here I'm using a box. Obviously it's using up some of the paint, but it's essential to do a test first so you don't end up spraying too thickly, too heavily, too lightly, and having all the problems that go along with that. Now, before I go on to my second session, which is always a minimum of 24 hours later, some people will like to sand the surface. Now, with nitrocellulose, like these NitorLACK products, you don't need to sand the surface to help with the bonding because the lacquer will just melt into itself, so it would adhere really well to previous coatings. But what you do need to do is sand if you've got any blemishes or lumps on the surface. There are some exceptions to this, like the metallics work in a slightly different way, but that's for another video when I'm talking about metallic paints. And I tend to do no more than 3 sessions, so 3 lots of 24-hour apart sessions before I leave it for a longer period to settle. Now with nitrocellulose, lots of people leave it for a couple of weeks before they'll go to the final stage of buffing, etc. It will partly depend on the temperatures where you are, and I like to leave it in a space which is roughly room temperature. So I don't leave it somewhere really cold, unless of course you're going for a relic finish. And like I said earlier, NitorLACK sell a few products which are specialised for getting that relic cracking look. If you're doing something like putting primer on, putting colour on, putting a gloss on, you may have a slightly different spacing between this. When I'm doing primer, colour and gloss, I still try to leave 2 weeks between 3 sessions. But sometimes the colours don't need 3 sessions. It might just be 1 or 2, especially with the translucent colours. One thing I love about the NitorLACK translucent colours is the colours are quite thin. The pigment's not really strong, which gives you lots of control over it. So as I did with my red relic guitar, I put a number of coats on before I got the rich red I wanted. But at the same time, I may have stopped earlier on with this more orangey colour. And that's something I really like about using their amber sprays to try to match more vintage looking guitars, because you can get such a range of amber. The thinness allows you to really build that up. Now this video was just focusing on how to use the cans. If you want to know what order to put things on, for example, primers, colours, top coats, NitorLACK's website is full of guides on how to do that. And I've also made some videos.